T.D. Jakes spent 30 years building something most pastors only dream about: a $45 million sanctuary in Dallas. 23,000 people showing up every single week. 5 children, each one positioned to carry the family name into the next generation. The Potter's House wasn't just a megachurch, it was supposed to be a dynasty. But here's what nobody is talking about. One by one, T.D. Jakes' own children built their empires somewhere else, outside his walls, away from his pulpit. And when T.D. collapsed on live television in November 2024, clutching his chest while 30,000 people watched in horror, the question nobody wanted to ask suddenly demanded an answer. Who inherits the Potter's House when the patriarch's own family already left? This is the Jakes family exodus, and the documented timeline tells a story that T.D. Jakes himself has never publicly addressed. Let's start with who we're actually talking about. T.D. Jakes has 5 children: Jermaine, the eldest, Jamar, Cora, Sarah, and Thomas Jr., the youngest. 5 children raised inside the most powerful black church in America. 5 children who watched their father build a religious empire from nothing. 5 children who, by every traditional measure of pastoral succession, should have been fighting over who gets to lead the Potter's House next. But that's not what happened. Not even close. Let's start with Sarah Jakes Roberts, because her story tells you everything you need to understand about this family. Sarah is the most visible of T.D. Jakes' children by a significant margin. She has over 4 million followers across social media. She's a best-selling author multiple times over. Her book, Woman Evolve, became a cultural phenomenon. She launched an entire ministry platform called Woman Evolve that hosts conferences attended by tens of thousands of women annually. She married Touré Roberts, who pastors a church in Los Angeles called the Potter's House at 1LA. Read that again. Sarah Jakes Roberts married a pastor who runs his own Potter's House franchise 3 time zones away from Dallas. She built Woman Evolve as her own platform. Her books, her conferences, her audience, her brand. Sarah didn't position herself to inherit the Potter's House in Dallas. She built her own thing, and she built it far enough away that there was no confusion about whose ministry was whose. Now consider Jermaine Jakes, the eldest son. Traditional church succession typically passes through the firstborn son. That's how it worked for Billy Graham. That's how it worked for Robert Schuller. That's how Joel Osteen's father positioned things before his death. Jermaine Jakes operates a ministry separate from the Potter's House. He maintains a notably lower profile than his father. He's not positioned on TD's stage. He's not being introduced as the heir apparent. He built something independent, outside his father's shadow. Jamar Jakes works in entertainment and media production, not pastoral ministry. Cora Jakes Coleman has her own ministry focus, but again, independent from the Potter's House operations. Thomas Jr. has stayed closer to his father's operations, but wasn't positioned as the clear successor either. Do you see the pattern here? 5 children, 5 independent paths. Not one of them was being groomed to take over the Potter's House until circumstances forced the issue. This is worth pausing on, because it contradicts everything we've been told about how megachurch dynasties work. Look at the Osteen family in Houston. Joel Osteen's son, Jonathan, has been positioned carefully for years. He preaches at Lakewood. He's visible on the platform. The succession plan is obvious to anyone paying attention. When Joel Osteen steps down, Jonathan Osteen steps up. That's the playbook. The Graham family followed this model. Franklin Graham was positioned for decades before Billy Graham died. The transition was seamless because it was planned, But the Jakes family, TD built a $45 million cathedral, attracted the 23,000 weekly attendees at peak. Each became one of the most recognized religious figures in America, and somehow none of his 5 children were clearly positioned to continue it. That's not an oversight. That's a pattern. And patterns tell stories that press releases don't. Then came November 2024. T.D. Jakes was preaching a Thanksgiving sermon at the Potter's House, live-streamed to over 30,000 viewers. In the middle of his message, something went wrong. You could see it happen in real time. His speech began slurring. His movements became uncoordinated. He grabbed the podium to steady himself. Security rushed the stage. The live stream showed chaos before cutting away. Within hours, reports confirmed T.D. Jakes had suffered a serious cardiac event. The man who had seemed invincible, who had commanded stages for 3 decades, was suddenly mortal. And suddenly, the succession question wasn't theoretical anymore. Here's what makes this moment significant. The Potter's House attendance had already been declining for years before TD's health crisis. Multiple reports indicated that weekly attendance had dropped from its peak of 23,000 to approximately 12,000. Nearly half the congregation gone before TD even left. That's not normal attrition. Churches don't lose half their attendance while the founding pastor is still active and preaching. Something was already shifting. The empire was already contracting. TD's collapse just accelerated a timeline that was already in motion. Then came April 2025, the announcement that changed everything. The Potter's House officially named Sarah Jakes Roberts and her husband, Toure Roberts, as co-pastors. T.D. Jakes would step back from day-to-day leadership. The daughter who had built her own empire 3,000 miles away was now being brought back to save her father's. But here's the question nobody seems to be asking. Did Sarah Jakes Roberts actually want this? Consider the timeline. Sarah spent years building Woman Evolve as an independent platform. She built it in a different city. She married a man who leads his own church in Los Angeles. Everything about her career trajectory said she was creating distance from the Potter's House, not positioning herself to run it. Then her father nearly dies on live stream. The succession crisis becomes immediate. And suddenly, Sarah is named co-pastor. That's not the profile of a planned succession. That's the profile of a forced one. When the patriarch collapses and no one else is positioned to take over, you call in the child with the biggest platform, regardless of whether that was ever the plan. Toure Roberts now has to somehow lead the Potter's House in Dallas, while also maintaining One LA in Los Angeles. Sarah has to balance Woman Evolve, which is her personal brand, with running a megachurch that's already lost nearly half its congregation. This isn't a dynasty smoothly passing the torch. This is triage, and the congregation can tell the difference. Church members don't keep attending just because the founder's child takes over. They kept attending because of T.D. Jakes, his voice, his presence, his 30 years of relationship with that specific community. Sarah Jakes Roberts is talented, successful, and influential, but she's not her father, and she spent years building an audience that is specifically not the Potter's House congregation. Woman Evolve attracts women seeking empowerment content. The Potter's House congregation is a multi-generational Dallas community that came for T.D. Jakes. These are different audiences with different expectations. So what happens to the Potter's House now? The documented trajectory suggests more decline before any stabilization. 12,000 members is already a significant drop. Transitions always cause additional attrition, even planned ones. Unplanned transitions cause more. And there's another factor nobody wants to discuss openly. T.D. Jakes' name has been connected to controversy. The Diddy civil lawsuit mentioned him, though he has not been charged with anything and denied involvement. But megachurch communities are sensitive to reputation. Some members leave over perception alone, regardless of facts. Add it all together. A founding pastor who suffered a major health crisis, a forced succession to a daughter who spent years building independence from the church, a congregation already down by nearly half, ongoing reputation questions that haven't been fully resolved. That's not the profile of a dynasty ascending. That's the profile of an empire transitioning into something fundamentally different from what it was built to be. Here's the part that should make anyone watching pay attention. T.D. Jakes spent 30 years becoming one of the most powerful religious voices in America. He wrote best-selling books. He produced films. He spoke at presidential inaugurations. He built the Potter's House into a religious and cultural institution. But his 5 children watched all of that and collectively decided to build their own things. Separate, independent, away. Maybe they saw something we didn't. Maybe they understood that inheriting their father's church meant living forever in his shadow. Maybe they calculated that their own platforms, built on their own terms, would outlast whatever happened to the Potter's House. Or maybe they simply didn't believe the institution itself was worth inheriting. Buildings depreciate. Congregations age. Religious movements rise and fall with their founding personalities. Perhaps the Jakes children understood that their father was the Potter's House, and without him, it becomes something else entirely. Either way, the documented facts tell a clear story. T.D. Jakes built an empire. His children built their own. When the patriarch fell, the children had to be called back to manage what was left. The Potter's House at peak had 23,000 weekly attendees and a $45 million campus. Today it has approximately 12,000 members, a 77-year-old founder recovering from a cardiac event, and a leadership team that was assembled in crisis, rather than cultivated over decades. T.D. Jakes' children aren't abandoning the Potter's House. That framing misses the point. They abandoned it years ago, quietly, by building their own platforms and their own audiences in their own cities. What we're watching now isn't an exodus. It's the consequences of an exodus that already happened, now visible because the circumstances made them impossible to ignore. Every megachurch founder faces this question eventually. What survives when I'm gone? The honest answer, documented across decades of megachurch history, is usually not much. Crystal Cathedral is now a Catholic church. Robert Schuller's ministry dissolved. Most megachurches decline significantly or collapse entirely within one generation of their founding pastor's departure. The Potter's House is now testing whether it will be the exception or the rule. Sarah Jakes Roberts and Touré Roberts are capable leaders with their own track records of success, but they're inheriting a congregation that came for someone else. They're managing a transition that wasn't planned. They're leading an institution that was already contracting before they took charge. T.D. Jakes built the Potter's House for his family to inherit. The $45 million sanctuary, the media empire, the brand recognition. All of it was supposed to continue. But his children spent those same 30 years building their own things, their own audiences, their own empires, outside his walls. When the patriarch falls, which empire survives? The one he built, or the ones they built while he wasn't looking? The answer to that question will become clear over the next few years. But the documented trajectory already points in one direction, And it's not the direction T.D. Jakes spent 3 decades building toward. If you found this video valuable, hit subscribe. This channel documents what's actually happening inside America's religious institutions every single week. The next video on screen goes deeper into how megachurch finances actually work, and why so many of them collapse when the founding pastor leaves. You're going to want to see those numbers.